very few days like that, just so you know, it's not like, it's not like this is a lot.
This is one of the things she's
This is like, you know.
All right, 5:33, your last.
So,
How do I connect to the internet here?
City One, I believe,
Yeah.
all caps. City New, and it's,
O-N-E.
yeah, City ONE, exclamation point, all caps.
With City Hall guest?
Yes.
Yeah.
we can cut that part out.
No.
Okay. We are the
Posted, so.
Common Council Economic Development Committee. It is Tuesday, September 27th. Call to order. Common Council Member Katie LaFarge-Shu.
Here.
Common Council Member Emily Falco.
Here.
Are there a need for corrections to the minutes that were provided?
No, not that.
No.
Hearing none. Topic A, the alleyway improvements. I think this committee had said that it's a good idea. We'd like to keep exploring it moving forward. So David, thank you very much for coming to represent the city on its legal behalf. I also asked one of the building owners to come to this meeting also to give a perspective. We also have another building owner amongst us. So from your perspective, what would it take for us to move down this path, no pun intended, the alleyway, to get that revitalized, to make it inviting to people to want to travel down that, to get to another point? If we want to create more entertainment, events or opportunities in these alleyways, we need to get through the legal hurdles. So what do you think?
We had kicked this around informally with other people, and I had kind of talked about it with you a little bit. There, as always, there's more than one way to achieve a goal. You have a couple of problems. The fundamental problems is, again, is that in most situations it's private property. And public expenditure on private property is always problematic. Plus, there's the question of, when I say private, who really owns the alley? Because a lot of them no one has title ownership to it. There are multiple easements allowing people to cross and recross. So first there would have to be an authorization by the city to allow for access or business access, that sort of thing. And there would probably have to be, there'd be code issues, lighting, that sort of thing. The second thing is there would have to be mutual agreements between the property owners as to what the extent of authority is going to be agreed upon for the public to use it, for private usage, whatever. There need to be mutual agreements, especially for things like lighting that goes across and that sort of thing. The third thing would be the issue of public expenditure on private property, and that could be handled through Judy, where as long as there was a program where the city determined that it was just like any other downtown improvement mechanism. If we established a fund for, assuming that you want to expend public money for that purpose, you could put together a program that would have, again, criteria. There'd have to be a proposal made have a committee established, the same way we handle any of our other economic development packages. So that's kind of the fuzzy outlines. And the other question is in order to be attractive, there has to be some place to go. Other than we don't simply want to have 45 people hanging out in an alleyway,
right?
With no ingress or egress or activities going on. So you'd have to sort of plan what it was that you were doing in order to make them attractive.
Right.
So, and again, you can try different things in different places because each situation is unique.
Absolutely. And the creative people, if you give them an empty wallscape or floorscape, they can come up with a lot of imaginative opportunities. I mean, are we calling it alleyway north and alleyway south, or vice versa, or whatever the name is? But we have two opportunities to move forward on, and I think it's possible to get all of the building owners interested in allowing that right away. Do you see that we need full council approval before we start utilizing your resource, you as the resource, to create a document that talks about that? Or
Yeah.
I guess what structure do you need from this committee to kind of outline what is it that we're looking to do? I mean, you've hit on the points, right? So
Yeah.
we want to clean up both sides of the alleyway. We want to clean up, obviously, the alleyway bottom of it
Sure.
itself. Whether we're using public funds or it's a combination of public-private, but at first you stated earlier that it's the legal aspect. So we need to get some kind of a document that says to the building owner, will you allow us the right of way?
And what we have to do, again, it's a chicken and egg thing.
Right.
You tell me what you want, and I'll tell you how to do it, but until I know, I don't wanna put together a theoretical document that says, well, why would we wanna do this?
Right.
So there has to be sort of at least a philosophic consensus as to what they're looking for. And then we can start crafting things, and it'd be a conversation where, here's what we're thinking, what do we want, then I can put something together and say, here's the framework that I was thinking about, does that work with you? Then they say, well, we can do this, but we can't do this, so it would be a dialogue.
Right. And I'm also thinking of like height, of how far up we would go with this. Is anybody else kind of thinking that way? I'm thinking of painting down those alleyways, lights above to really make it
Yeah,
attractive.
you have, if there are things that are going across, then you have to worry about things like delivery trucks and things like
Right.
that, so, I mean, just practical considerations.
Right.
Yeah, none of that sounds insurmountable. So, I mean, other communities do it pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So, if the first step is for this committee to outline what exactly we would be looking to do, right? And then you.
Or the property owners, again, it's important that you ask them what their threshold,
What they're willing.
what their
Yes.
threshold is in order, because otherwise, and the problem is because you really need consensus. You can kind of get you don't want to get 99% down the road and then have somebody say, nope, forget it, I'm out of this.
Mhm.
That becomes problematic. I mean, we can theoretically condemn alleyways, but I don't think we want to get into owning alleyways. That can be problematic on so many levels. So, okay.
Well, and then legacy costs are part of the
Yep.
discussion.
Yeah. And again, things like very often, again, knowing the alleys the way I do, there are sometimes utilities, exhaust pipes, things like that would have to be, again, practically addressed. We'd have to require, grates, things around like that, so that.
It also gives us an opportunity to really clean it up. I mean,
Sure.
I think there's a grease trap or something back in there that, isn't
There are
as
kinds-
aesthetically pleasing as.
Yeah, there are all kinds of special things, and again, which addresses, depending on where you're talking, a lot of alleys will have dumpsters in them, and if dumpsters are not going to be allowed in the alleyway because it's going to be a pedestrian usage, then the property owner is going to say, that's great, but where am I going to put my garbage? So that can be an issue.
Kitty, you have any questions for our lawyer?
Nope.
Emily?
No, I don't. I mean, I would think this is kind of what I've been mulling over in my head and wanting to clean up the alleyway behind my husband's property and, and the adjacent properties. And, I think there are there's a wide range of where you can go with this. Like, you can bring in new pavers and you can really restore it to some crazy amount of thing, or there's simple things that can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Just even installing some simple lighting and putting a fresh coat of paint on something can, kind of brighten the corners, so to speak, and, clean it up and just make it a little more inviting. I mean, I was out there, if I may speak frankly, just the other night after I finished my shift at Roots, and a young gentleman felt it was fine to urinate right next to me. And I was just like, dude, you can't pee back here. And he's like, well, this is just what I have to do right now, I'm sorry, man. Right, so I'm like, well, there's obviously, it's like, because it's dark, it invites that kind of behavior. You know, just, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, I mean,
So lighting is sort of the big thing,
I
right?
think some nice ambient lighting, even if there are garbage cans and there is trash back there, could just at least create a little bit more of a safer environment and something that's more pleasant to walk through, because they are cut-throughs
Mhm.
for people. But as far as like how we go about that, you know, it seems like the city doesn't really wanna take responsibility for doing that, so I don't know what the best way is to do that. I mean, because the other thing is like, you could have each building owner do something on their own, but then there's like a lack of consistency,
Mhm.
you know,
Well, the other
which
thing
then
is
can
it-
look kinda sloppy.
Is it very often the building owner has no greater rights behind the building, near their building, than any other place and nobody else? Because they simply have the legal right to cross and recross the
Mhm.
entire length, 'cause that's how they get in and get out.
Right,
So it's not like they own the alley behind their building. So giving a private expansion to say, oh, sure, well, you can do it behind, that's not necessarily legit. You see what I'm saying? Because it's not that the property line extends behind the building into the alley. It's that everybody on the alley has the right to cross and recross, but none of them have the right to put a gate up and say, this is my portion of the alley.
right, but they would have the right, like, behind their building to put some aesthetic lighting or.
On their building.
On their side,
Yeah,
and
as
if
long as
they
you
had
didn't-
agreement with the building owner across,
Sure,
then that would
Sure,
be.
yeah, again, that's what
Right.
but it all has to be mutual,
Right,
so.
yeah,
It's nothing impossible, it just can be complicated.
it is,
Yeah.
like everything.
Yeah, right.
So I think what you need is consensus from the council, right? That this is something that we would like to, so the complicated process that we'd like to take the first complicated step.
Well, the step is they can certainly use me as a clearinghouse, but again, unless there's someone from the city who's going to do a survey of the downtown property owners whose land's back on alleys and say, would you be willing to, is that something you want to do? Is that something that the community development is interested in focusing on? Is that something that DO is interested in looking at? Again, then, like I said, we need to know what they want before we can tell them how to do it.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So our plan relative to the rear alleys and the rear facades, I already have verbal approval from HCR on the DRI, Downtown Improvement Fund. When we know our final numbers on that, which is gonna be sometime next year, when Springbrook is done, hopefully they'll be the very last project. We'll know how much administrative money we have left in the budget, that's the city's funding, it's their grant portion. And our plan was to use that money for to develop conceptual plans for the rear facades and alleys. That would be, in that process, we'd be working with the building owners to determine who's interested in rear facades, particularly because this would be a first step towards going for grant money for rear facades. So in that process, the thought was that we would have a consultant on board that would understand the historic buildings and also be able to do renderings, so we could have an idea of, on paper, of what the building owners want their rear facades to look like. And then we'd be going for New York Main Street program grant money, which is through HCR. It's in the annual CFA round. So you apply for that in any given year in July. You get awarded in December if you get the award. So that funding, we'd be going for about $250,000 to $300,000 or so. That funding would allow us, much like the DRI, Downtown Improvement Fund, to grant the funds to those building owners that express interest would apply for the money. And, so that state money could be, applicable to private property. And along with that, 250 or 300 within that would be $15,000 that could be used for the alleys themselves. But part of that facade program would also be, if you go back, there is just like spider webs of wires and all kinds of things on the back of the buildings, and it's really awful. Part of that money we would hope on each building, we would be able to, we couldn't bury the electric lines, but at least we could put them in channels and clean that up as well as part of the project for each building. Hopefully some of the buildings that have the old signs that are all faded out, they could be repainted, so a lot of that old artwork could come back. The focus of the grant program is residential, so the key to the project is we'd be improving the residential access from our parking lots and our main street up to the apartments in the back. But by doing those roof facades, we could also, for the businesses themselves, it would also help because they might be able to take a space that's really long and narrow and split it in half and have one business facing Main Street and one business facing out the back. So we're expanding the potential rent on these buildings as well. So there's a whole lot of things we can do with that. But the first step is we have to get through the DRI, at least for that money, to determine how much money we have for the conceptual planning portion. And then those concepts and renderings and drawings and the information we gather through that process would be part of the grant application to the New York Main Street program. Whether we can get it all done by next year or the year after. But that's what we were planning to do. Oneana Hotel is a big part of that, so we're hoping our timing on that would work with the Oneana Hotel, getting an owner that's gonna move it along and do something as well, because it's a huge chunk of that whole alleyway.
Right.
So,
And so
that's,
from your
that's what,
perspective, in the interim of 12 to 24 months, we still need to move forward through some of these hurdles that are in front of us.
yes,
And so,
and,
I'm not quite sure we actually need to go through the full council now after hearing that city staff has been planning this for quite some time. We're only 12 to 24 months off, but in the interim, we, as a committee, we can still move forward with ideas of one, getting through the legal challenges, and then two, getting through that process, we'll get the property owners on board so that they understand there's opportunity for larger money, 12 to 24 months, but in the interim, we can kind of do more of a grassroots methodology to it.
Again, there could be, you could have two, where you, with the understanding that something's coming later on,
Correct.
you can have an interim agreements contingent upon and things like that, so that you do essentially a project, a pilot project, and then see how that flew, and then that would give other people more comfort in jumping on to another thing later, and we could build in flexibility into any agreements that we had that is subject to, a greater grant money, greater opportunities.
Right. I've got correspondences in play with the mayors of Syracuse and Glens Falls and the acting mayor of Ithaca, and asking them about the timelines and their various hurdles and successes and obstacles that they need to deal with in creating the same sort of reimagination of alleys as we're talking about here. So as those correspondences are generate any kind of content of interest, I'll share those with this commission.
And me as well.
Yeah, of course.
Judy?
some of the items, like the garbage collection and things like that, I think that some of them could be addressed if the business owners, building owners, created a bid. I really think that that's,
Created
a
a bid.
bid, that's a second component to making this successful, I think. I think some of these items are things that, are not necessarily a task that the city can or should be doing. The businesses themselves, or not even the businesses, the building owners are the ones that can create the bid. That would give them a lot of power, a lot of leeway. I don't think that I think they've heard a lot of that, but I just don't think they really understand how much helping themselves through that process and through getting a bid would fix some of these things that they're so frustrated about.
Is that also an opportunity for us to correct those situations through codes?
That would be a Stephen question, I think.
Yeah, I don't,
But like, you know, when,
I mean, because we also have that situation down on Water Street, right?
but that's because, the situation in Water Street is because we need a place, everybody needs a place to put their garbage, and what's happened with that is that's theoretically an agreement, with the private owners and the private haulers. But what's happened is that there's no, because it isn't exactly right next to any particular, in my opinion, the reason it's not reinforced as much is because since it isn't right next to anybody particular's dumpster is right next to the building, it's sort of remote, so anybody can drop stuff off there midnight, Saturday nights. I mean, nobody has ownership of it, and as a result, the haulers don't particularly care about it. It's just a pain for them, and it becomes a dumping ground for things like mattresses and you know. So it's because it's quasi-public. We don't have as good eyes and ears on it as we did when the dumpsters, frankly, were right by the building owners. So creating a central location for dumping, like a transfer station type thing, is problematic in its own because then nobody's seeing it every morning. Every property owner, when they come in the morning and unlock the doors or something like that, they can see whether there's been garbage left or something's overflowing or something like that, because it impacts them directly. Whereas if you move it away, then it becomes a general problem and nobody's problem.
I think the difference with a bid would be now businesses that are using the service, paying Casella, whoever it is, the cost would be borne by them to clean up anything that's there. That's it.
I agree with the consensus that a BID would be a giant step forward, but getting from point A to point B has been problematic in the past. Just getting consensus, and BIDs tend to have to be, although they can be legislatively sanctioned, they generally need to be generated. Well, we've been down this road, generated by the businesses themselves.
And we're just past point A, and we're near even seeing point B
Yeah.
in this process, but
But that, you know,
we
all,
have gotten to a place where we are past point A, and maybe Emily, you and I can kind of do some reconnection with some of the business, rather the landlords downtown.
but all that being said, we can still loop back around to where we started, which is there can be private agreements, there can be small projects, there can be pilot projects, and then again, I think sometimes success breeds success. And whereas people aren't willing to jump off the deep end, they're willing to see somebody else go into the pond, and then there's a benefit, then all of a sudden they want to be a part of it.
They've heard it, but they don't understand it, and
Yeah.
seeing it is gonna make all the difference in the world, even in small doses.
So we're all public. I'd like to hear from private, and that would be Ed. Did you want to?
Would you mind if I've got a 6 o'clock to us?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Besides, Ed will talk to me anyway, no matter, even if I ask him not to, he'll talk to me.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
You gonna wait till I leave before you start talking?
Sir?
You gonna wait till I leave before you?
Well, no, and usually a lawyer has something to say on the way out. Giving you plenty of breath there.
What'd you say your name was?
George.
That's right.
So what I got out of listening to everyone speak here is, you need a bucket or a vessel to hold all these thoughts and ideas. And while, a bid is something that could do that, an LDC could do it, and I think better. That's a place that you can actually hold and store land. You can put public money and private money into it. You can get agreements to consolidate easements from all the property owners, those that own the property and that don't. That's a vehicle that allows you to go by, and we can look at that. I mean, Greg could do that pretty easily with his computer. You can go to the county website and do it and see who actually owns what in the alley. And, you know, David was right, not all the alley is owned by any one person, bits and pieces of them are. I've collected bits and pieces over the year by picking them up at tax sale, when nobody will pay the tax on the property, I go, I'll do it. But an LDC would give you that vessel, not only to hold public and private funds, but allow you to negotiate with the property owners over their easements or ownership, whichever they may hold. And when you can show them something that's in it for them, I mean, we got consensus on this back in the 80s, I guess. And with the building owners, but not with the city. So if you folks are at a point to do it, I can dig up some of that old paperwork, we'll find out who still owns the buildings and see what interest level they have. Some may jump right on, some may say no. The ones that jump on, we can work with, the ones that say no, we'll watch and maybe wanna get on the train later.
Right.
It's gonna, you know, it's gonna annoy some people, I mean, we have people now parking in the alleys. They're parking in places they don't have the right to park. They have the right to transverse. They don't have the right to sit there and park all day long. You know, our city attorney will be one of them. He and I have had that conversation many times because he knows that I bought the alley around to his building and mine. And he says, well, you can't stop him from driving there, which is true, I can't. But I can park my car there for a week. I have to figure a way around it.
Right.
So there's ways to do this, and I think an LDC offers you a much better opportunity to consolidate varying interest with the city's interest, if in fact the city has an interest. And you can contain the garbage within your property. I do it at 189 Main Street. I have no dumpster outside. I have a garbage room in the basement. And the hauler goes in the basement and takes it out. The tenants throw it down a garbage shaft that exists on the first floor. They have requirements to bag their stuff up and tie it or double bag it. Then the hauler goes in and takes it away. Others could do the same thing.
Greg, do we already have an LDC?
Gotcha. One was created.
Right, one was created and we've been in
Process
process.
and was done with it as far as I know, was involved in.
Well, you still have one, Greg?
I don't believe they disappeared, but, I mean, it's lit, I found it listed online. But I don't know any more about it, we're trying to track down the attorneys that helped set it up, which wasn't our city attorney.
Oh, it was
Yes,
not,
information.
okay.
Yeah, those parties to the LDC are no longer part of this government, so.
But if the LDC existed, we could put other things in that bucket if you just look at it like that. And I agree with, you know, David's comment that, you know, once they start seeing a certain level of success, they'll jump on. Judy's comment is valid. We have buildings that are typically 4,000 square feet on the Main Street level, and most tenants are looking for 2,000 square feet. And they're not easily divided unless you had a separate entrance in the back. Now it's easily divided. So it's in their interest to do it as well. But it does mean changing some habits. There's a bunch of ratty trees back there that aren't doing anybody any good. I think you can get, I don't know about Community Bank, but when Wilbur was there, they were on board with helping. If we decided we had to have a dumpster location back there, there certainly is space you could do it, but you'd want to avoid the cluster that we've created on Water Street. And again, an LDC could help with that. That would be the person that would contract for the garbage removal. There would be a responsible party and a responsible hauler.
So how would this LDC supersede, or is it just that they come along with the building owners?
No, you'd have to go, the LDC would have to approach the building owners and see if they're interested in joining. And there'd have to be a benefit for them. I'm not suggesting use a heavy hand. I've never been a proponent of that. If they understand what it would mean to them to clean up that back alley, and you have a Main Street level, you may have a deck, a common fire escape, which we tried on Water Street, across the back of the buildings, creating a second alley, plus a fire escape.
Right.
And it would have a consistent look to it. Now with the lofts on Dietz coming around and that cleaning up, there'll be more foot traffic. It's a great place to collect it. It's a great place to put tables out back for folks to eat. You know, you can restrict in many of the cities that Mark mentioned earlier, that he's checking with their mayors. They have removable ballards in some of their alley entrances, and they restrict the vehicular traffic or delivery traffic to certain hours.
Makes sense.
I mean, it's doable and workable if it's something we decide as a community we want to do. And I think it would be, I think it'd be smart to get the whole council involved and see if they like the whole LDC idea as a place to start. It's not an expensive thing to do. It's a corporation that you can put public and private money in. It solves a lot of the problems of municipal and private partnership.
Okay.
So that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So on the LDC, is that something that you could, Greg or Mark, send to the other committee members, what you have, or?
Yeah, when we have something that's ready to share, we don't have very much right now, than the information I found on the previous one, so I think we're gonna reach out to the attorney from, the previous effort, partner.
I mean, the LDCs basically just need a mission statement, you know, or this is what we're trying to do. And then you start, and it's an empty bucket.
Right, of course, a bid might accomplish the same thing arguably, and LDC might also provide us some options that we're not talking about here, so I think there's Greg and I talked about it, a few folks here, I think there's a lot of value in pursuing, having an LDC, and then now that you have the tools, see what you can fix with it.
Right. I think there's gonna be one answer, I think this is gonna be multiple prong attack. So I guess for our committee, for the meeting, why don't we come up with some ideas of the framework for the legal, and then kind of some of the creative ideas, and I draw stick figures, and I know that you two are creative, so I'm gonna lean heavily on you guys for what could we do back there?
Sure.
Um,
If you want some renderings, I gotcha. Should we talk about it at the council meeting? Just get a consensus that the council wants this committee to continue to pursue this before we put too
Might
much.
be premature.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we could just keep coming, I'd rather go with a full packet of this is what we've conceptualized, and this is what we can do. We have interest with building owners.
Do you need, like, a survey made to ask building owners if this is something they wanna do? I mean, I can, you know, work on pursuing that further. It's been very difficult getting in touch with some of the building owners. You know, I don't know if some of them just don't live around here, or they
Right.
just aren't receptive to answering their email. I'm a random person, you know, whatever.
Right.
Before putting the effort into a survey, I think we can probably try to make that, personal connection to folks, and then determine, if we're not able to get a hold of, and
Right.
then pursue those folks. But I think there's an awful lot of folks we can probably make a connection to and get a sense of, generally speaking, their sense of if this is something that they feel is a good idea and want to be a part of.
I think making that personal connection would be probably a better approach.
It's so easy to disregard a survey, and just,
I just don't know, like, sometimes, like, in order to move forward with things,
Yeah.
you need, like, proof that people want something to happen, right?
Well,
So, I don't know
that, a council member and the mayor, visiting might have some effect.
if, sure.
All right, so let's work on that for our next meeting. Okay, topic B. I think I brought this up before, and as I talk with local developers or just folks that are interested in doing any build out, Greg, this is kind of, I'd like to hear you from your perspective as our city administrator. We have lots, whether they're a small lot to large lots, that if a developer wanted to come in and build. To the mayor's point, he wants to bring in 1,000, we all should want to bring in 1,000 people, employ people. First question is, how So is the city government in a position where they can take the lead to put in the infrastructure, work with the developer? I know in some places where the developer might have to pay a tap fee up front to help government absorb some of those costs. But most developers cannot absorb all the costs that are involved in getting that infrastructure there.
Can you clarify, what infrastructure, water, sewer?
Water, sewer, curbs, street, sidewalk.
So you're talking about developing areas that are undeveloped, which there are a
Correct.
few of, but, you know, some bigger lots.
We know
That's
some
Sixth
lots that
Ward.
are in down the Sixth Ward.
You know, that's not something that's typically done, as you said, normally developers come in there, if there's a sewer main extension or water main extension, that's something, the cost that they bear. I think our code says that the city council, can opt to pick up or contribute to that cost up to 50%, if I remember correctly. Those sort of water and sewer extensions, extension requests go to the Board of Public Service,
Mm-hmm.
according to our code. And then it goes to the council ultimately. I'm not remembering a time when the city is, I'm thinking of like Hillside Commons, that's something that Hillside Commons, that developer, new development paid for the infrastructure improvements. They actually took over a portion of City Road. That would be unprecedented as far as maybe you know some better history than I do about another situation where the city acted as a developer of infrastructure. Usually it's the other way around. They come in, they might build the infrastructure, and then there might be others that hook up later, and there might be a fee for them to hook up. I don't think there's been that situation. Usually it's, they're paying for a city infrastructure extension, we take it over and then go from there. So,
I see that as a major hurdle to get a developer to come in, to build a street to the city specs. I just think of the rail yards right now, where Otsego now owns, and we're trying to get this road improved, and it's gotta be to certain specs, and they're having a hard time in getting it, investing into that. How do we expect to develop those large acre lots that are down in the Sixth Ward?
I don't know.
We're talking
Obviously,
millions.
The Otsego House or the IDA for that efforts and what their conversations have been, if developers have been turned away or have turned away because of the lack of infrastructure or what the deal is there. I don't know. Is that the answer? I can't tell you. If the city invests and builds a road, infrastructure for a theoretical, development, obviously you're running the risk that, you know, what are you designing for? What sort of development is gonna come in? You wanna provide the, you know, the proper side of needs and that sort of thing.
I mean, I back up and say, I live on Kearney Street, so who built Kearney Street? Who built any street?
They were improved at one point by the city, they might have existed before that as, who knows, you know? At some point, the property owners deeded the streets, you know, street release over to the city, because there was a need for that or a purpose.
Well, at some point, government took the lead and brought it up to a certain spec, right?
Maybe, I don't know the history of Kearney Street or any particular street, but probably when there was development, there was a developer who was building houses that, you know, created a street. That would be my assumption. And then it was deeded over to the city.
Right. But it was government that put in, you know, the water, sewer, it was the utility companies that put in their pipes.
Potential, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the history of the build out. I mean, it might have been developers paying for it then, as it has been my limited 10-year experience here.
Right.
Would be interesting to see what the precedent is. If there's a precedent.
Well, it's been so long since something's happened in the city of Winona that I don't think we have a, you know, a precedence to lean on.
Within the last 100 years, any number of streets came into being, to your point, you know, that followed a progression, you know, houses first maybe, infrastructure followed, maybe infrastructure first, houses followed. I don't know who paid for that, I don't know, was it developers, was it the be interesting to know the history. I think if we know the history, then we might be able to project some, way forward based on that. So I think it's worth knowing.
Right.
Mark Simonson.
But what are we gonna do about it today? So I kinda wanted to know Greg's perspective of, to move this forward.
I think if there's a developer who's interested in building something like a new street, a new, major development or a big thing down the rail yards, they're gonna be coming forward to talk with us about their interests. And in those discussions, there might be discussion of sharing costs of infrastructure build out through that Board of Public Service extension. Judy's got her hand up here, jump in, go ahead.
So with the rail yards, likely that's gonna be commercial or industrial, which is gonna involve job creation, which means the developers will be able to apply for funding, state and federal funding, for economic development for that infrastructure build out. Now, in the residential part, it depends on what kind of projects they have, but that would be also built into their project cost, and they would be going after state and federal money for that as well. That whole thing is part of their cost. You typically, a community, I've been in infrastructure in upstate communities for over 30 years, and typically you don't build it and hope they come. That's not the way it works. The developers factor that in for their costs, and then they get funding packages put together and grants, and then they build it. Because doing it the other way is completely opposite. Plus, like with water and sewer, you're putting a burden on everybody in the city to pay for a potential build out later that a developer should be paying for.
I'm not saying build it and they will come. I'm saying walk alongside the developer. If they come and they say, I can build 25 homes for the 1,000 people, here's 25 homes I'm willing to build, but I'm not willing to foot the bill for the streets, the curb, and the sidewalks, which are going to be the city's responsibility. That in lies the problem. They're willing to put the money up for the homes, but they're not willing to put the money up for the sidewalk, the curbs, and the streets.
So that would have to be a city decision to make. But on the larger developments, I'm not talking single family, I'm talking larger housing developments and larger commercial and industrial, that is pretty much paid for by other funding that they can get.
So in your 30 years experience, the community itself never paid for it, they always chased after state and federal money,
The developer did.
the developer did.
Mhm.
The communities always kind of sit back and don't create a public-private partnership.
They do create a public-private partnership because they are providing that service to the developer, and the ongoing maintenance and everything is being paid for by the communities afterwards. So it's not a freebie to the community. I mean, they have ongoing costs for that, and in maintenance and everything else.
Right, the legacy
Right.
costs of the streets, the curbs, and
Yeah.
the sidewalks.
But typically it's a matter of the cost is borne by the development projects. I mean, you could cost share certainly if you want to, but having worked here for 6 years, we don't have those resources.
Right.
So, you have to make a decision on that, and that's gotta be part of what you're considering when you get a development.
So, given your experience, the 2 lots that we've mentioned a couple of times, if a developer wants to develop them and comes to you, what are you suggesting to them?
They would be building those costs in on their project, and we'd be working with them to help them find funding if they aren't already finding it themselves, depending on their team. And, we'd be partnering with them to get the project completed.
I just checked, looked it up, our city code, 290-16, water main extension and sewer main extensions. Expense of laying, building, or constructing water or sewer main extensions may be borne up to half by the city with the consent of the common council upon application of the owners of property requesting such extension. So there's a developer, they own property, they've got a project, they're interested, for whatever reason, it's not quite working out, and they want some assistance with this extension, and it's deemed by the council to be in the city's best interest, we can, for our own code, consider bearing half of the
that's information in the toolbox.
Yeah, I think certainly, if there was a developer knocking on our door asking about this, that conversation would happen, but I'm not aware of that.
Greg, there are models that you guys could follow. New York State Electric and Gas uses one. I've done several developments there where they had to extend gas and power lines. And they do it, with a guarantee from me as the developer, but they don't get their money until each property is sold. As each lot is sold, they retire a portion of that debt or collect the money. And there's municipalities that will go in for a developer and put in the roads, sewer, the water, sidewalk, curbing, because it's beneficial to most municipalities to do it themselves their own way, so they know the quality of the work and what they're getting and what's underground. And then as the developer sells each house, that expense gets returned to the municipality. So they're essentially paying for it, but you're helping them get to the end game, and you're controlling the quality of the work that is done, especially underground.
The other way to control the quality is.
I mean, you watched what we did up at Hillside Commons. That was a negotiated situation where, Mayor Miller was kind of a force, but he sent me off to Newman Development, and I think if I recall, you were in the room when the first thing was, we're gonna run the water up Blodgett, and we're gonna put a cistern up there and put a big pump up there so they could get the water pressure that they needed for their sprinkler system. And if you recall, I said, well, why are we doing that? Because I knew down in Bugby, there was a 12-inch water main with probably 100 PSI. And if you recall, what they did dig up the street and found, a 12-inch pipe to a 6-inch pipe to a 4-inch pipe to a 3-inch pipe. And at the end of the day, the developer agreed to put the pipe in all the way up, eliminating the total need for a cistern and a pump.
Right, at their cost.
But at their cost, it was cheaper for them. And the reason I jumped on that in that meeting was who was gonna maintain that pump? It was gonna be you. And that was their plan, is to give it to the city. And the city won't maintain it. Now you don't have it. You got a problem solved. You solved the problem for a bunch of neighbors all the way up the street. The storm sewer got improved. I mean, they did a lot of work as opposed to building a pump station. And probably money-wise, it's about the same for them. But for you, at the city, it's a big difference. You don't have anything to maintain anymore.
And we didn't have to contribute anything to that.
No, sir. They covered the total expense. So there are ways to do these things if you've got, people at the city that are willing to get involved with the developers early on. But Judy comes from a different perspective. I don't live in the grant world. I know it takes a long time, and most developers don't have a long time. They want to come, hit, and go. Communities all around this country use the model amortizing is what they call it.
I think, that might be a little bit easier to come around, from my perspective, if the city was flush in our, water fund, general fund, pick a
Yes,
fund.
sir.
The problem is we struggle to pay for projects to maintain the infrastructure we have, so it's difficult to.
Chicken and egg right now. I mean, we made decisions for a long time that put us in the position we're in now. But the city does have the ability to bond for these things, and it makes some sense in that case to do it. You can retire the bonds as the properties are sold. And Len's example, of a 25-unit development, you get 1/25 of your cost back every time a house is sold. So it's not a long-term play. The developer's benefit is that he doesn't have to lay out the upfront money to get it done. The city's benefit is you get the 25 homes, the residents, the ongoing tax revenue, that the quality of the work that was done in the roads and sewers and water pipes. So it's a win-win if we take that approach. And there's only a few parcels around here you could do that with, I think, right now. There's a couple on River Street. RSS has pretty well got one of them locked up, but there's another one I know down there, it's about 5 acres, that's privately owned.
And then isn't there a parcel or two down in the rail yards that could potentially have homes?
Yes, sir. When we redid the zoning code, we laid out workforce housing down there, yes.
So to get to the mayor's 1,000,
It's doable.
it's going to
Maybe
require all
imagine.
types of housing, yeah, it
Yes,
takes
sir.
imagination, so,
He's got a good imagination.
better than you are.
No, I don't butter him. You ought to be in our Friday sessions. There's no,
Ship sailed along.
there's no butter involved. It's a hard roll.
All right, well, I'd like to have a discussion.
It's just a thought. That's what they do every other places. I mean, I'm not an expert in it, but I've done development in Alabama, Florida, and Maine, as well as New York.
Well, I just bought land in another state, and it's
Oh,
on development,
sorry.
and it's exactly how it's set up. There's tap fees that go with it, and they were paid for by the developer, but that goes back in, the municipality paid for originally, and that's what goes back to them. And I asked them, what was the tap fees, and that small lot, it's a 1/6 of an acre lot, it's $5,800. So, that's how that community's doing it, and that's a small city, 3,500, something like that, 3,600, it's a city, so.
Well, your goal is to be attractive, you know. And it's important to have, the IDA calls them shovel-ready lots all the time, but do they have any? They've got lots full of shovels.
Well, given the fact that we're coming up on an hour, I had a local property owner, business owner approach me about the negative impact that our bus schedule is having on multiple downtown businesses, and I just wanted to understand better the situation from city staff's point of view of the bus schedule. Meaning the hours.
What is the negative?
Well, that, I believe this is what I'm being told, the last bus ride is at 10 PM, is that correct?
I think they continue to scour, don't they?
So they used to stay out until 2, I know there was a bus.
Right, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
A lot of buses go till 2.
Do we still offer that?
Yeah.
We're still offering until 2, 3?
You know, so you're-
This is why I was checking. So we are offering on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, a bus until 2 AM.
Yeah, don't hold me on the exact time, I think it's the last bus, leaves, did for sure.
But I know it's a point for them to try to round up the last few folks and move them up to the campus.
What exactly was the impact that,
That the businesses
were
are closing earlier. I was being told that the bus route was ending at 10 PM and that it's affecting the business that could stay open later.
Which bus route? The student
It's
bus?
sunny.
No, they go until like 3 in the morning or something.
yeah, I think
Didn't Dave
so.
Hoteling just say that at a meeting?
He did,
That
yeah.
he literally like won't leave until people are
Exactly, that's
bussed back.
exactly right.
And last week of downtown is 3 AM, they're on Union by 3:15.
Yeah.
So it's 3 AM?
And the bus routes are right on our website.
Thank you.
Did they specify what day of the week or?
They were looking at the Thursday, Friday, Saturday,
Oh, they should.
so.
And why were they closing early? Because people weren't coming downtown or because people were downtown?
Yeah, their business is dependent upon students, and they're seeing less students coming downtown, and they thought it was because of the bus schedule.
Mm.
Maybe other
Jeanette?
factors in place.
Right now, the college population is down by about 1,000. We've
Mhm.
actually seen decreased ridership overall with OPT, with the different college students. Some of it is COVID-related. They have changed their habits of where they're socializing. And so we are actually seeing a decrease in passengers. And we've been seeing that for quite some time. But it's not due to the bus schedule. It's just a change in practice with the college students themselves.
So is the marketing aspect of that, is that on city staff to create that opportunity, or are we asking the two organizations to do that?
They are fully aware when the college students come on campus, it's part of their fee schedule, and they know the OPT routes. We also have advertising for our bus schedules. There's different pamphlets that are handed out, the orientations of the college students. Some of the college students depend on the bus services very strongly, but as far as the nighttime socialization, that has actually decreased. But it's not due to the bus routes itself, it's just due to the changes of.
You're saying the culture of them have changed.
And the demographics of them, in terms of population.
And it may change as COVID restrictions, not restrictions, but COVID habits change, but they've seen a great decrease since then. And also, there are about 1,000 students less on campus.
Is that between
Or is
the
that
two?
between two of them?
No, that's just for SUNY itself.
Yeah, I don't know that the number's quite that high, but.
Well, it was during the spring.
Yeah, I know they're down 500 up at SUNY and down 100 at Hardwick, the current numbers.
Mark, did you want to talk about topic E?
Honestly, it's just a matter of direction. The marketing committee here, which Emily and Katie are both on in chairs, is very specifically engaged in bringing alumni and eventually some specifically targeted professional services into Oneonta as residents. That's the hope. It's a pretty big ask. I have confidence in this group, absolutely have confidence in this group. But I would think that they should not be distracted from that with anything, no matter how valuable the effort might be. And the effort at welcoming students and baseball tourists is arguably one of the more important things we can do. So what I would suggest is that the marketing committee, who are reporters to this group and adjunct to this group, because they are because they're funded, and there needs to be oversight essentially of that. Those expenditures needs to run through something that's not ad hoc, essentially, in the typical terminology. But this may very well need to be something that is addressed by another group, and it may be a Destination Oneonta scenario, or it may be, the potential of a bid, or it may be, I'd say, an ad hoc group of folks that have an interest in the downtown's profitability. I just want to be clear that it's very. I feel it would be counterproductive to ask the marketing committee, as it exists, to be engaged in this. I think it's important that they keep the task focused on the recruitment piece.
So you're looking to get a group of folks that are going to be totally absolved in marketing to our college students and baseball fans.
I think it's not the same group, and I'm a little gun shy about saying when we appoint another ad hoc or put together another ad hoc committee. You might want to give me a few weeks before I go down that road. But I think that's probably the direction this needs to go.
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, currently the marketing committee does have a pretty huge task in front of it, as far as just kind of, working with people in the community and people on the city administration to kind of come up with a strategy for how Oneonta can market itself to potentially people to come here.
Okay.
I don't think that this can't not be a part of the conversation. Because the whole marketing, it's a huge thing, but it could definitely be a part of the conversation. It could start there. There's a lot of things at play, when you talk about marketing, right? It's not only just developing a strategy, but then you have to implement it somehow, and that involves money usually, and so you have to either pay someone to do it, or pay someone to design something or make something. So there's a lot to be discussed. you know, with that, but, you know, certainly it could come up in conversation, you know. We are meeting tomorrow. I think the time was like 4 or 4:15. I'm gonna be here at 4. Just in case, so.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it was 4:15, but I just wanna make sure.
Accommodate me, which is why I know.
I have in the past invited people to things and showed up late, and, you know, it's not the best thing to do, but I did invite, David from Destination Oneonta to join us in that conversation. It's like how, you know, once we kind of figure out a strategy, how are we gonna implement it? And there are, you know, so, you know,
That's great, especially.
anyone is welcome to come, you know,
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I guess, right? And, oh, go ahead, Katie.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, one of the things that we were talking about, or, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say is Destination Oneonta is supposed to be hosting the website on behalf of the marketing committee, so I think it's good to involve him in that conversation and have him understand what's going on and what those expectations might be going forward.
Right, and what are we capable of right now with the current staff that we have? Like, what are some small things we can do, and then what do we have to hire out, and how much does that cost? I mean, it's not, you know, unfortunately, like, these kinds of things, you know, we can maybe get volunteers. I don't wanna take this all into like marketing committee land, but, you know, it's a, yeah.
I had a conversation with Laura Lincoln, that I forwarded, to you, the outcomes of, relative to, how the marketing committee can be connecting to the alumni. So they provided a lot of very specific, I left out the things that we can't do because why bother if you don't see them there, the things we can't do. But they gave us a number of avenues to pursue, and, so that's, I sent that to you as a copy on that email a little bit earlier on.
Okay, great.
Just, you know, it's, you know, I'm not gonna micromanage this, but this is your committee, but I will be, you know, as clear as I possibly can be, that it's all about bringing people in here. There are other, avenues to, and other interests, frankly, that can drive the conversation around, how we can, you know, take better advantage of the numbers of people who are on 205, among other things, and the students. I see that they're somewhat related, but I don't see them being, you know, all that related. So I think it's really important to keep our eyes on the prize, and that is
Sure.
that we need to bring those people in here, and it's not a small ask.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I think, yeah, one of the things that we talked about in our initial meeting was just better, well, I don't wanna use the word marketing, but better packaging of the things that already happen here that make our community great. And those are things that can be shared with tourists, but our goal is to share them with potential new residents. So there is a little bit of overlap, but I see what you're saying, like if we focus on tourists, that's like short-term gains, we're sort of trying to, our goal is to help build the community by packaging Oneonta in a way that makes it appealing. And that will certainly capture tourists, but that's not our objective.
Right, and that
Makes sense.
showcases like what we do have here, because I think, I mean, it isn't just it's not just that we want tourists to come here, but when people, you know, I know like there are plenty of places that I've visited and I was like, oh wow, I could imagine myself living here. It's a beautiful place, you know, which is why like downtown enhancements only helps in that, like by the springtime when there are people coming back around here again, you know, seeing seeing various kinds of beautification, it makes you want to be like, oh, I want to be a part of it.
Well, I think you raise a really good point, which is like, does the city have a beautification committee? What's our approach to beautification in the city? It's mixture, right? Because it's city staff, it's volunteers, it's property owners, it's the OCI. It would be interesting to think about some organized oversight of that, to be able to move those goals forward in a way that is more consistent.
Even to just have someone to volunteer to, I don't know, to do various things. I don't know,
Yeah.
plant flowers in the spring. I know there
Or
have
even
been various groups
suggest
that have
or
done that, but
organize.
yeah, I don't know. Or like to find a project and move it forward. But then I don't know, I don't know, this is always the thing, it's like, anything, it takes a little bit of money, so I don't know if there is money that can be allocated towards city beautification, even if it's just a small amount, paying for plants or supplies or paints or whatever it is, or cleaning stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know.
But just looking at downtown Oneonta and hearing some of the conversations, the front of the stores on Main Street, isn't there kind of this gray area between the building owners' thoughts of how far out do they own and maintain compared to the city, and how much do they own and maintain?
Yeah, that's a
Who's
big conversation.
shoveling the snow off? Is it all the city, or is it all the building owner, or is it, again, a public-private partnership? To your point of oversight, maybe this LDC that Ed mentioned earlier,
The bid.
or bid, is one of those avenues where that oversight comes into play, where the building owners and the public have a say of what's happened.
I feel like Mark has some thoughts.
Yeah, for me, it's just what the next step is to bring some people to that next point on the line from point A to point B, relative to bid. I really do believe that bids, I don't think there's anything wrong at all with pursuing and owning an LDC and using that as a tool. But I feel like a bid is so very specific, and there are so many examples of how it's done well in other cities. We have a couple of new property owners of consequence in our downtown. We have some commitments from folks downtown who own quite a bit of property that they will invest themselves in bid. That we just, I feel like there's some conversations that I need to have in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so what, in your estimation, is the holdup on a bid?
People, it's not on anyone's, front burner. It's just, they don't see it. But it does give them, we find ourselves in the middle of the winter, and people are shoveling half their sidewalk and complaining that the city hasn't, done whatever, there's this constant, in the moment, concern about, this is mine and you should have done that, and and it's all taken care of if we're a little bit more proactive about, the structure of it through, this is how a bid works. And that takes care of security, it takes care of promotion, it takes care of so many things. It's a very easy sell, and I think there are a few landlords who understand it and have already promised to step up, and I think honestly it's kind of probably on me in these next couple of weeks to see if I can, make them a little bit more responsive to a timeline.
Yeah, it would be great to engage them, to engage the rest of the.
Exactly.
property owners.
It'll take, I think, 4 landlords of consequence to start to move that ball down the field, and then others they'll latch on. But we have them here, and we already have their commitment, generally speaking. And I think, again, I think it's on me. So I'll see what I can do.
Yes, Jay?
I just wanted to share that the city had developed a community landscaping beautification fund from the forestry sales. When do that, that fund has been depleted over the years, but now that we're going to be doing the forestry again, we'll be able to refund that fund upon, if the council so chooses. And then those funds will be available to allocate an annual percentage, for landscaping and community and beautification.
Jenny, what kind of funds are we talking about, just generally?
Last time, don't quote me on this, but I think we got about 178,000 last time, from the sales. And that covered us for a number of years for tree planting and,
Yeah, that,
and things like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, but I can look up the number, Mayor, if you.
No, that's fine, that's fine, I just generally wondering.
But that got depleted, I wanna say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we finally ran out of funds in there.
It's nice to know that that might be an option, that could be game changing.
They won't complete that project until.
Yeah,
sometime
no,
in 2023.
some of these things are just gonna be down the road. It's one of the hardest things for me to get my mind wrapped around, is that I can't make everything out of it right now.
I just wanted to remind you that
Yeah,
that will be an
I appreciate
upcoming
that.
event.
That's cool.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to the agenda?
Not today, I saw we were